The bus rattled along the old city road, its seats filled with tired faces on their way to work and school. Among them sat a young boy, only 9 years old, his small hands holding a few coins his mother had given him that morning. The coins clinked softly in his pocket, and he guarded them carefully. They were enough for his bus fare, nothing more, but to him, they were precious. He looked out of the dusty window, watching people rush past, each lost in their own world. The boy was quiet, shy, and not used to drawing attention, but fate had its own plan for him that day. At the next stop, the bus door opened, and a woman climbed on. Her clothes were worn out, her shoes patched in several places, and her face carried the weight of hardship. She searched her pockets, digging nervously as the bus driver looked at her with impatience. The line of passengers waiting behind her began to shuffle their feet, irritated at the delay. She whispered something softly, her voice almost breaking, as she realized she didn't have enough money for the fare. Her eyes darted around the bus, meeting cold stares and averted gazes. Some passengers looked away, pretending not to notice. Others murmured under their breath, annoyed that she was holding everyone up. The driver's expression hardened. He raised his voice, telling her she had to pay or get off. The woman lowered her head, embarrassed, clutching her old bag tightly as if hiding behind it. She wanted to disappear in that moment, away from the judgment of so many eyes. She turned slightly as if she might step down and walk, even though her legs looked tired, and her spirit seemed even more exhausted. In that silence, the little boy felt something stir inside him. He saw how alone she looked, how everyone was ignoring her struggle. He remembered his mother's words, "If you see someone in need, and you can help, never look away." He didn't think twice. His small body rose from the seat, and with trembling hands, he stepped forward. The sound of coins in his pocket suddenly seemed louder than the voices around him. The boy held out his handful of coins to the driver. His voice was quiet but steady as he said she could use them. The driver blinked, surprised. The passengers stopped whispering. Every eye turned toward the boy, this small child with big courage, offering what little he had. The woman gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand as her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head at first, unable to believe that a child would step in for her. She tried to refuse, whispering, No, keep it for yourself." But the boy insisted, pressing the coins forward. The driver, with a reluctant shrug, accepted the fare and waved her inside. The woman walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes never leaving the boy. She sat in the seat across from him, still holding her bag tightly, her lips trembling with words she couldn't quite form. The boy gave her a shy smile, his cheeks pink from all the attention, and then he looked back out the window as if nothing had happened. To him, it was simple. She needed help, and he could help. That was all. But to the woman, it meant everything. She looked at him again and again, wondering how a child with so little could have a heart so big. Around them, the bus grew quiet. Passengers who had turned away now stared with softened eyes, some even ashamed they hadn't stepped in themselves. The moment lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Though no one said a word, the bus rolled on, but the woman's thoughts stayed fixed on the boy. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, the way he had stood up, the way he had offered his coins without hesitation. It was not just the money. It was the kindness, the humanity, the reminder that good still existed even when the world felt cold. She whispered a thank you again, her voice barely above a breath, and the boy nodded, almost embarrassed, as if he didn't deserve so much gratitude for such a small act. The ride continued, and people slowly returned to their own worlds, but the feeling of what had just happened stayed with them. The woman clutched her bag tighter, not out of shame this time, but because she didn't want to forget the moment or the boy who had given her hope. She promised herself she would never forget his face, his courage, and his quiet generosity. For the boy, it was just another morning. He didn't know that his small act of kindness would soon ripple into something far greater. He didn't know that this one simple choice, born from compassion, would change his life in a way he couldn't yet imagine. All he knew was that he had helped someone who needed it, and that was enough to make him smile as the bus carried him toward the rest of his day. That night, after the long ride, the boy returned home as he always did. His small shoes were dusty from the walk, and his mother welcomed him at the door with a tired smile. She asked him how school was, and he simply nodded, not mentioning the bus incident. To him, it didn't feel like something worth telling. He had only done what his heart told him to do, nothing more. He placed his bag down, washed his hands, and sat at the small wooden table where his mother served a simple meal. They ate together quietly, unaware of how much that day had meant to someone else. But across the city, the woman he had helped was wide awake. She sat in her small room with her bag beside her, replaying the moment again and again in her mind. She had known hunger, she had known struggle, but that day she had known something far more powerful: kindness. It wasn't just kindness, though. It was the purity of it. A child with coins barely enough for himself had chosen to give them away without expecting anything in return. That thought stayed with her, pulling at her heart like a string she couldn't ignore. She told her story to a neighbor later that evening, and even they were touched, their eyes softening as they listened. They asked about the boy, who he was, where he lived. She could only describe his innocent face and the shy smile he had given her. "He reminded me of hope," she whispered. "Hope I thought I had lost." That night, she lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, but sleep would not come. Instead, she kept thinking of the boy. She thought of the way the other passengers had looked away, how the driver had been ready to throw her off, how alone she had felt. Then she thought of the boy standing up with courage beyond his years. Her heart swelled, not with sorrow this time, but with a strange, grateful warmth. She promised herself she would not let that act fade away. She would do something about it. Meanwhile, the boy was fast asleep in his small bed, unaware that he had become the center of someone else's thoughts. His dreams were simple, filled with the small joys of childhood. He didn't know that outside his little world, his kindness had set something in motion. His mother, watching him sleep, only saw her son resting peacefully. She didn't know he had given away his fare that day. She didn't know how much courage he had shown. To her, he was just her little boy, innocent and good. The woman, however, carried the weight of the moment like a treasure. The next morning, she woke early and made her way to see her sister, someone she had not visited in weeks. Her sister lived more comfortably, managing a small business, and had often tried to help her, but pride had kept her away. That morning, however, she walked straight to her sister's home, her heart full of the story she needed to share. When she sat down at the kitchen table, her sister asked her why she looked so emotional. With tears in her eyes, the woman told the story of the bus, of the boy's hand holding out the coins, of the look in his eyes when he smiled at her. She described every detail as if it had been carved into her memory. Her sister listened silently, her face growing serious, her hands folded in front of her. When the story ended, her sister leaned back in her chair, her eyes wet but her voice steady. "Kindness like that," she said softly, "should never go unnoticed." The woman nodded, her heart pounding. She knew her sister was right. They sat together for a long time, making plans, deciding that the boy deserved something more than just whispered gratitude. They didn't know his name, but they would find him. The woman was certain she would recognize his face anywhere. That night, as the boy once again fell asleep in his small room, his mother smoothing the blanket over him, something was already on its way toward him. He didn't know that the woman he had helped was planning to return. He didn't know that the coins he had given away so easily were about to open doors he never imagined. To him, it had been a small act, but to the woman, it had been life-changing. The city was quiet, the streets slowly emptying as night deepened, but in two different homes. Two hearts were beating with very different feelings. The boy slept peacefully, while the woman lay awake, her mind alive with determination. She would not let this child's kindness disappear into silence. She would find a way to thank him, a way to show him that his small act had mattered more than he could ever know. The next morning felt like any other for the boy. He woke up early, rubbing his eyes as the soft light of dawn crept through the thin curtains. His mother called him from the small kitchen, reminding him to get ready for school. He washed his face, put on his faded uniform, and picked up his worn-out backpack that had been stitched several times. To him, it was just another ordinary day. He had no idea that something extraordinary was waiting outside. When he stepped out of the house with his mother, the street felt different. Neighbors were standing by their doors and windows, whispering and pointing. The boy looked up curiously, wondering what had caught everyone's attention. Then he saw it. At the end of the narrow lane, parked neatly by the curb, was a sleek black luxury car. It gleamed under the morning sun, its polished surface reflecting the small houses around it like a mirror. The boy blinked in surprise. He had never seen a car like that so close. In his neighborhood, people rode buses, bicycles, or simply walked. A car of that kind belonged in the wealthy parts of the city, not here. His mother frowned slightly, holding his hand tighter, unsure why such a vehicle would be here. The boy tugged her arm, his eyes wide with curiosity, but she whispered for him to stay close. The car door opened slowly, and everyone on the street seemed to hold their breath. From inside stepped a figure the boy recognized immediately. It was the same woman from the bus. But today, she looked completely different. Her hair was neatly tied, her clothes were clean and presentable, and her posture carried a quiet confidence. Gone was the tired, embarrassed woman clutching a torn bag. Instead, she stood tall, her eyes scanning the street until they landed on him. The boy froze, his heart thumping in his chest. Why was she here? Why had she come in such a car? The woman's eyes softened as she spotted him, and without hesitation, she walked toward him. The crowd of neighbors began whispering louder, curious about the connection between a child and someone who arrived in such luxury. His mother shifted uncomfortably, her hand still resting protectively on his shoulder. When the woman reached them, she bent down, lowering herself to the boy's level. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she smiled gently at him. "Do you remember me?" she asked softly. The boy nodded shyly, his voice caught in his throat. He didn't know what to say. He had never expected to see her again, and certainly not like this. His mother looked from the woman to the car, her confusion clear. "What is this about?" she asked politely, though her tone carried a hint of worry. The woman looked up at her and spoke with quiet respect. "Yesterday, your son helped me when no one else would. He gave me his bus fare when I had nothing. It was a small act to him, maybe, but it meant the world to me. And I promised myself I would find him again." The boy's mother blinked, taken aback. She turned to her son, surprised that he hadn't mentioned it the night before. She placed a gentle hand on his head, both proud and emotional, though she stayed silent for a moment. The boy simply lowered his eyes, embarrassed at all the attention. By now, the neighbors had gathered closer, their curiosity stronger than their restraint. They wanted to know why a luxury car had driven into their simple street. They wanted to know what connection tied this poor boy to such an event. The boy shifted uncomfortably under their gaze, wishing he could disappear, but the woman kept her focus on him. She reached out and held his small hands in hers. "What you did," she said, her voice trembling, "was more than kindness. It gave me strength I didn't know I still had. And today, I came here because I cannot let that act be forgotten. You reminded me of humanity, of goodness, of hope. And I want to give something back." The boy tilted his head, unsure of what she meant. He didn't want rewards. He hadn't done it for that. To him, it was natural to help. His mother, though, could see the seriousness in the woman's eyes. She could sense that this visit was not ordinary. The car behind them stood shining like a symbol of mystery. Its engine purred softly, and the driver waited patiently. The neighbors whispered about rich relatives, secret fortunes, and unexpected miracles. But for the boy, the moment was simply overwhelming. He had not expected to ever see this woman again. And now she was here, standing in front of him, telling him that his small act had changed something in her life. The woman glanced back at the car and then returned her gaze to the boy. "There's someone else who wants to meet you," she said gently. Her words carried a promise of something even bigger, something the boy could not yet imagine. The street grew silent again, everyone waiting, everyone curious. The boy's small heart raced with both fear and wonder. He held his mother's hand tighter, sensing that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet understand. The street was still buzzing with whispers as the woman stood before the boy and his mother. Her presence was no longer one of shame or struggle. Today she carried herself with dignity, though her voice trembled with emotion as she began to speak. The boy's mother looked at her with quiet confusion, still trying to understand why this woman had arrived in a car so grand, why she was holding her son's hands with such intensity. The woman took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the boy. "You may not understand now," she said softly, "but what you did for me yesterday saved me in more ways than one." She paused, her voice catching. The neighbors leaned closer, their curiosity uncontainable, their breaths almost audible in the heavy silence of the lane. "I was not always like you saw me. Yesterday," she continued. "Once, I had a normal life. I had a home, I had work, I had stability. But life, it can change so quickly. A few years ago, tragedy struck. I lost my husband to illness, and soon after, I lost my job. Everything I had worked for slipped away, and little by little, I found myself with nothing. I thought I had friends who would help, but people turned away when I needed them most." Her voice cracked, and she blinked back tears, her gaze dropping for a moment before she lifted it again. The boy's mother tightened her grip on her son's shoulder, listening closely, her heart softening. She could see that this woman wasn't telling a simple story, she was carrying years of pain in her words. "I tried to survive however I could," the woman went on. "There were days I didn't eat so I could stretch what little I had left. I walked instead of riding the bus, except when I was too tired or weak. Yesterday was one of those days. I had nothing left in my pocket but the broken pieces of a life that once was. When the driver told me to get off, I felt the world collapsing again. And then..." She turned her eyes back to the boy, her face glowing with emotion. "Then you stood up. You, a child with so little, gave away what you had without hesitation. Do you know what that meant to me?" The boy lowered his head, his cheeks warm, too shy to respond. His mother glanced at him, a mix of pride and disbelief filling her heart. She hadn't known her son had done something so selfless. She felt a lump in her throat, realizing that her little boy had a heart larger than she ever imagined. The woman wiped her eyes, then gestured toward the car. "When I told my sister what happened, she was deeply moved. She has always tried to help me, but yesterday, for the first time in years, I accepted her hand. And she told me, we cannot let this boy go unrecognized. We must meet him. That is why I am here today. My sister is in that car right now." She wanted to meet the child whose kindness reached us both. The crowd murmured, shocked. A sister? A wealthy sister? The story was more surprising than they had expected. Some neighbors looked at the boy with newfound admiration, while others simply stared at the car, wondering what might happen next. The woman reached for the boy's hand again, holding it firmly. "You reminded me that humanity is not gone. You reminded me that kindness does not always come from the powerful, it comes from the purest hearts. Yesterday, I was a stranger on a bus, invisible to everyone. But you saw me. And for that, I will never forget you. the boy finally looked up at her, his small eyes searching hers. He didn't know how to respond. To him, it hadn't been a great act, it had been a simple choice. He had seen someone in need and stepped forward. But standing here now, with all eyes on him, he began to realize that what had been small to him had been enormous to someone else. His mother's eyes welled with tears. She bent slightly, wrapping her arm around her son protectively, her heart swelling with pride. She whispered softly, "I didn't know. I didn't know he had done this." Her voice broke slightly, and the woman smiled at her through her own tears. "Now you know," the woman said gently. "And I want you to know this too, your son's kindness has changed my path. My sister has insisted we help him, and we will. We want to support his education, his future. We want to be part of his journey, because he has already become part of ours." The boy's mother gasped quietly, her hand tightening on her son's shoulder. She didn't know what to say. Gratitude mixed with disbelief inside her, as if her world had suddenly tilted in a way she had never expected. Around them, the neighbors whispered even louder, some moved to tears, others nodding with respect. The woman glanced back at the luxury car once more, her expression softening as she turned again toward the boy. "Come," she said warmly. "There is someone waiting who wishes to thank you too." The boy hesitated, looking up at his mother. She gave a small nod, though her own heart was racing. With slow steps, the boy followed the woman toward the car. The door stood open, the sunlight glinting off its polished edges, as if inviting him into a moment that would change his life forever. Asterisk. The boy's small footsteps echoed in his own ears as he slowly approached the shining car. The crowd behind him had grown, neighbors and passers-by gathering to see what would happen. The black luxury car seemed out of place on the narrow street, but its presence brought an air of wonder, almost like a dream unfolding in broad daylight. His mother followed close behind, her hands clutching the strap of her worn shawl, her face a mix of worry and awe. The car door opened wider, and from inside stepped another woman. She was dressed elegantly, her posture strong and graceful, her eyes sharp yet kind. This was the sister. She looked at the boy with a warm smile that softened her dignified appearance. Stepping closer, she bent down so her eyes met his. For a long moment, she simply studied him, as though trying to understand how such a small boy could carry a heart so large. "You must be the child my sister told me about," she said, her voice filled with both gentleness and authority. "You are the one who gave her hope yesterday." The boy shifted nervously, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his backpack strap. He nodded slightly, unsure what else to do. The elegant woman reached out and touched his shoulder, her eyes glistening. "You reminded us that kindness still exists in this world. My sister has suffered for years, and yesterday, when no one else cared, you did. That one act may have seemed small to you, but it was not small to us. It was everything." The boy's mother swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears as she listened. She placed a hand on her son's back, proud but overwhelmed by the attention he was receiving. She wanted to speak, to thank them for their words, but her voice was caught in her throat. The elegant woman turned toward the mother now. "You have raised a child with a heart greater than wealth. That is more valuable than anything we can give. But still, we want to give back. We cannot simply drive away and forget what your son has done for us." The crowd murmured again, whispers spreading quickly. Some neighbors wiped at their eyes, touched by the sincerity of the moment, while others looked on in disbelief that something so incredible was happening right in their street. Sister gestured toward the car. "We want to help," she continued. "From today, his education will be taken care of. He will never have to worry about school fees or supplies again. We will ensure he has the opportunities he deserves. And beyond that, we will also help your family. You do not have to struggle alone anymore." The boy's mother gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks as she looked from the sister to her son. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her son, her little boy who had simply shared his coins on a bus, had changed everything. The boy, too, looked confused. He did not understand the weight of the promise being made. To him, school was just a part of his life, something he went to with his old bag and worn shoes. He didn't realize how much these words meant, how much they could change his future. But seeing his mother's tears and the light in her eyes, he knew it was something important, something big. The woman he had helped on the bus stepped forward once more. She knelt in front of him, her voice breaking as she said, "You gave me dignity when I felt invisible. You gave me courage when I felt like giving up. And because of you, I found my way back to my family. I will never forget you, little one." She pulled him into a gentle embrace, her tears falling into his hair. The boy stood still at first, then slowly wrapped his small arms around her. It was a hug that carried more meaning than words could express. Around them, the crowd grew silent, moved by the sight of two lives forever connected by a moment of kindness. When the woman let go, she smiled at him through her tears. "Never stop being who you are," she whispered. "The world needs more hearts like yours." His mother, overwhelmed with gratitude, stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she said, "I don't know how to thank you. My son is just a child. He only did what felt right. We never expected anything in return." The elegant sister shook her head. "And that is exactly why this means so much. Kindness that expects nothing is the purest kind." The car door remained open, as if waiting. The sister explained they would return soon with arrangements for school and support. But for now, they only wanted to meet him, to let him know he had not been forgotten. They wanted him and his mother to understand that their lives were about to change. As the car eventually pulled away, leaving behind the murmurs of astonished neighbors, the boy stood holding his mother's hand. She looked down at him with tear-filled eyes, her heart bursting with pride. "You see," she whispered, "a small act can move mountains. Never forget this day." The boy nodded quietly, still not fully understanding the weight of it all. But deep down, he knew something extraordinary had happened. He had only wanted to help someone who needed it. He had not expected to be noticed, let alone remembered. And yet, his small gesture had opened doors to a future brighter than he could ever imagine. That evening, as he lay in bed, he thought back to the woman's eyes on the bus, the way they had filled with gratitude when he offered his coins. He thought of the car, the promises, the embrace. And though he was just a child, he carried a lesson that would stay with him forever. Kindness, no matter how small, never goes unnoticed.